.NET DY with a focus on SAP. Welcome back to SAP Weekly Brief. This week is going to be different. We are doing something ambitious, connecting 3 threads that all point toward the same conclusion. Thread 1. The competitive landscape has fundamentally shifted. SAP is no longer competing primarily with Salesforce and Oracle. The real contest is now with Anthropic and OpenAI for the intelligence layer of the enterprise. Thread 2. SAP's own model Rasta inside the Generative AI Hub tells us something about how SAP sees the new landscape, and it tells us something SAP should probably address. Thread 3. The news of the last 3 weeks, Project Fuji, the EU antitrust settlement, the Dremio closing, and the countdown to Q2 earnings on July 23rd all sits inside this new competitive frame. 1 episode, 3 threads, 1 conclusion, and at the end, a direct ask of Walldorf. This is independent commentary, not investment advice, all sources linked in the show notes. Let's begin. Section 1. The competitive landscape has changed. For most of the last decade, the SAP competitive conversation has been about the same set of names: Oracle, Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, Microsoft Dynamics. Every quarterly earnings call, every analyst report, every board meeting compared SAP to those 5 companies in some combination. That conversation is now obsolete. Look at what happened in the last 4 months. Anthropic's cloud surpassed OpenAI in enterprise business adoption in April 26 at 34.4% versus 32.3% according to RAMP data. Anthropic's valuation reached $965 billion in May, ahead of OpenAI's $852 billion from March. Both companies filed for confidential IPOs within a week of each other. Both launched enterprise deployment ventures with forward-deployed engineering models. Anthropic with Blackstone, Hellman and Friedman, Goldman Sachs at $1.5 billion, OpenAI with Deploy Co. at $10 billion and 19 investors. Meanwhile, on the traditional competitor side, Workday CEO Carl Eschenbach stepped down in July, replaced by co-founder Anil Bushri, returning to lead the company. Workday shares are down 45% year to date. Oracle is being repriced as an AI infrastructure play, not as an application competitor. Salesforce is fighting a defensive battle over the Slack API. All 3 are dealing with seat license erosion as agents replace human interactions. This is what the Fortune analyst Jeremy Kahn observed already in February. An enterprise AI battleground is no longer about who has the best CRM or HCM or ERP. It's about which foundation model dominates the top layer of the agentic stack. Christian Klein has been reading this correctly. Watch his consistent framing across the Q1 call, Davos, and Fortune interviews. Suit plus AI plus data flywheel. Customers don't gain value by applying commodity large language models on top of transactional business applications. This is a unique combination only SAP can deliver. This is not defensive positioning against Salesforce. That is offensive positioning against Anthropic and OpenAI. Klein is telling the market the commodity models alone are not enough. You need the SAP knowledge graph, the business process encoding, the governance layer. That's the SAP moat now. The competitive frame has moved from horizontal, SAP versus other enterprise software vendors, to vertical, the data and process backbone versus the intelligence layer that sits on top of it. This is the single most important shift to understand in 2026. Every strategic conversation about SAP that doesn't start here is starting in the wrong place. Section 2, Project Fuji and what it really tells us. Now into the repositioned landscape. 3 weeks ago, SAP dropped a signal the most of the market misread. Klein has personally taken direct control of AI product development on a program called Project Fuji. He absorbed the responsibilities of department board member Mohamed Alam, rather than immediately naming a replacement. COO Sebastian Steinhäuser has taken over industrial AI. The company confirmed the logic to CIO.com. SAP is evolving its organization to accelerate its transformation towards an AI-driven autonomous enterprise. The new structure brings AI, data, and core applications closer together. This is the second major reorganization of 2026 after the Customer Value Group launched in March. Combined with the hiring freeze and travel freeze announced in the same period, the message is clear. SAP is redirecting capital and executive attention aggressively towards the AI competition. Read this correctly. Klein taking direct AI control is not a panic move. It is a recognition that the AI competition is now the defining strategic contest of the company. And it deserves the CEO's direct attention, not delegation to a board member. Under Klein's watch, the 10 billion buyback program continues through 2027. The first tranche of 2.6 billion euros was completed by April 1st at an average price of 161. That buyback is now expensive at 161. It looks smart at today's 142 euros. The board is signaling long-term confidence with capital allocation, not just with words. Wall Street has been rotating out of enterprise software into semiconductors. That is why SAP, Salesforce, and ServiceNow are all under pressure despite strong fundamentals. But the analysts community remains bullish. UBS at 205 euros, Berenberg at 215, Bernstein at 276 euros. The gap between the current share price around 142 and the consensus target about 205 is the widest of the year. That gap will close on July 23rd. Q2 earnings are the moment when the market decides whether the AI competitive position is credible. Section 3. The EU antitrust endgame just concluded. Another underreported story from 3 weeks ago, on July 9th, the European Commission formally concluded its investigation into SAP's on-premise maintenance and support practices throughout the commitment decision. This is the closing of the case opened in September 2025. SAP's concessions include wider access to single metric contracts, the ability to place unused licenses in a separate shelfware partition, and maintenance are, for that part, clearer contractual provisions on initial license terms, abolished reinstatement fees, and reduced back maintenance fees. So, every SAP customer with on-premise licenses now has additional contractual leverage. The commitment decision is not settlement optics, it is enforceable. For CXOs listening, in any maintenance or licensing conversation happening between now and year-end, raise the 4 remedy areas explicitly. Demand shelfware partitioning, demand single metric contract access, demand clear initial term provisions, demand elimination of reinstatement penalties. These are yours to claim now, not something to negotiate. The strategic implication is bigger than the individual contracting terms. SAP just cleaned up a regulatory overhang that has been weighing on the company for 2 years. Combined with the VS&FD sovereignty authorization from June 9th and the Dremio acquisition closing on July 6th, SAP is entering Q2 earnings with 3 major strategic overhangs cleared and 1 large capability now formally integrated. That is a stronger starting position than the share price suggests. Section 4, the model roster problem. Now to the piece that ties everything together. And this is where I speak plainly, because this is where the strategic conversation actually needs to happen. Let's start with the facts on the table. SAP's Generative AI Hub, the model layer inside SAP AI Foundation, currently runs on OpenAI, Google Gemini, and Anthropic's Claude. Alongside those, SAP added Mistral and Cohere as sovereign model options for European customers. That's the full roster. No DeepSeek, no QN, no GLM. That's not an oversight, it's a decision, and it's a defensible one. SAP sells into regulated global, often public sector customers Compliance optics matter more to SAP than to a mid-sized manufacturer experimenting with a chatbot. Choosing Western hyperscalers plus European sovereign options is the safe, board defensible path. But here's the strategic tell. SAP isn't actually betting on any single model. Listen to how SAP itself frames it. The AI Agent Hub is positioned as a vendor-agnostic control plane for LLMs and MCP servers. The real moat, by SAP's own description, isn't model IQ. It's governance, business context, and SAP's proprietary domain models. SAP ABAP1, SAP RPT1, trained on decades of enterprise process data that a general purpose model, Western or Chinese, cannot replicate. In other words, SAP has already told the market that the underlying language model is a commodity. It's swappable. That's the architecture SAP built. And yet the model roster contradicts that architecture. It's commodity in theory, curated in practice, and the curation happens to exclude the fastest growing, most cost-efficient tier of open weight models on the planet. Now, the competitive situation briefly. The gap between the best Chinese open weight models and the Western frontier has closed to single digits on composite benchmarks. Price per token often sits at a third, sometimes a tenth of the top Western providers for the workloads that make up the bulk of enterprise volume: document classification, structured extraction, retrieval, augmented search over internal knowledge, first-pass coding assistance. That gap in price without a meaningful gap in quality is not a rounding error. It's a line item the CFO will eventually ask about. Every serious enterprise AI buyer outside the SAP ecosystem is already routing workloads across multi-model stack by cost and task fit. SAP customers inside the Generative AI Hub currently can't do that with the open weight Chinese tier. Not because the architecture forbids it, because the roster does. Section 5, an open letter to Walldorf. So hear the ask, and I say it plainly as an independent voice, not as a sales pitch for anyone. SAP should open the Generative AI Hub to bring your own model options, specifically self-hosted open weight models, so customers can route non-sensitive, cost-driven workloads to whichever model clearly clears their own governance bar, including the Chinese open weight tier, hosted on the customer's own infrastructure or an EU-based intermediary fully within existing data residency rules. This isn't a demand that SAP endorse Chinese labs. It's a demand that SAP finish the architecture it already announced. If governance is generally the moat, then model choice should generally be open, with SAP's context layer security controls and audit trail applied consistently regardless of which model sits underneath. Anything short of that is a curated menu wearing an open architecture costume. And here there is the strategic reason SAP should want this beyond customer flexibility. If the competition is now with Anthropic and OpenAI for the intelligence layer, then the best defensive move is not to marry SAP's fate to those same two vendors. Model diversity is architectural insurance. Every customer that runs multiple models on top of SAP is a customer who cannot be captured by a single foundation model provider. Klein said to himself, the LLM is a commodity. SAP's own architecture threat is that way. The next step is to let the customers treat it that way too. My assessment from an EY perspective, 3 things I would tell every CXO this week. First, stop framing your SAP strategy around Salesforce, Oracle, or Workday. That framing is obsolete. Frame it around the foundation model layer. Ask which models are approved for which workloads in your organization. Ask who controls that decision. Ask what happens to your architecture if Anthropic doubles pricing next year, or if OpenAI restricts certain use cases. Second, use the EU commitment decision now. The remedies are legally binding. Every maintenance negotiation and every license renewal between now and December should reference the 4 remedy areas explicitly. Customers who move quickly will lock in flexibility their peers will not have. Third, prepare for July 23rd. Q2 earnings are the moment where the market decision decides whether Klein's AI capital allocation strategy is working. If SAP posts strong cloud numbers, plus explicit AI adoption metrics, plus commentary on capital discipline, the share price recovery accelerates. If any of those 3 lags and disappoints, we get another leg down. I will be reporting live after the results. Subscribe now on Spotify or YouTube so you don't miss the analysis.